Hey, friends.
Hey, girl, hey.
We are back at the mark. Beautiful. I think this topic is going to resonate with a lot of our viewers, listeners, justice followers, and women and people of a big age.
Absolutely, because I don't think we question this. We live in a very meritocratic society, allegedly, and there is something about being successful. There are certain norms that we have all adopted. And for us, as reformed attorneys, I think we've gotten to a season of life where we're interrogating a lot, and that includes the value of leadership and what it means to be a leader.
Yeah, so this episode topic came to me from this really interesting way. So my eldest daughter had her bat mitzvah, which is a celebration. She turned 13 and did just a beautiful job. She worked so hard. She held a lot of truths at the same time. She questioned a lot about what was going on in the world. I mean, I'm biased. I thought she did amazing. But it was also, like a big deal. Like she had to speak in front of around 200 people. She had to sing. She wrote a speech. All of our family from all over, friends, community came. It was more attention than she's ever received in her entire life. So that's the background. Someone close to me called me after the celebration and the ceremony the next week and said, I just want to let you know that I let Ella know that after seeing her in the ceremony, I told her she was going to be such a great leader. And from this person, that was a huge compliment.
For sure.
She is an incredible leader in her own right, an incredibly successful professional, has worked her entire career to get to where she is. But I immediately felt so defensive of my daughter. Like, why does she have to be a leader? Why is that being placed on her? What if she wants to do something else?
Yeah.
Why is success equal to leadership in a particular way? And so we've been talking about it, and I don't think you and I have ever, well, I don't want to speak for you, but I've never felt more in control of my life than I do now, but objectively have the least leadership. I mean, like, outward leadership.
I was about to say that because my first reaction was, well, she is already a leader and will continue to be, but maybe not in the way that that person meant. And that's also what I want us to get into today, right? Because you are still a leader. It just looks different than in a professional way that is a very myopic definition. And so we're going to dig into all of that.
I'm so excited, and I can't wait to hear your opinion and all of everyone's opinion, because this is something that is, I think, placed on us from an early age.
I mean, and despite all of the barriers and hurdles that we know women and people who stand at different intersections have to overcome to even become it.
And the most successful leaders, we would argue, are people who are never celebrated.
Exactly.
In this particular way.
Very true.
So we're going to get into all of that. But before we do, who are we sponsored by today?
Today's episode is sponsored by our friends over at LaFleur. You all know that we have been big celebrators of We've hosted live events at their showroom. We visited the showroom in Chicago. But more importantly, we love their style and their mission.
Yeah, and I think it's so fitting that this episode around leadership coincides with an episode that they're sponsoring, because celebrates women in leadership of all types. They also have an incredible program for women who are running for office where they can get free clothes. And their clothes are just so well appointed. They do capsule wardrobes. And one of the things that Tashira and I are trying to do is show how certain looks that we might not have naturally worn are going to look and feel different on different bodies.
Absolutely. So I am today. Well, first, we're both wearing this amazing, if you were listening, hop over to YouTube because you want to see these outfits. But we are both wearing this amazing crochet dress. On me, it's midi length. On you, it is maxi.
But everything's maxi on me.
At 5'11", and you are?
5'1".
5'1".
5'1" and 3/4 on a good day.
Let's not forget the 3/4 because that shit is important.
So almost a foot difference.
Almost a foot different. My build, for folks who have never seen me before, is very much slim thick. So I am curvy and tall, but slim in the waist. So I'm wearing a size medium in my dress.
And I would say I'm short,
Petite.
stocky,
You are petite small.
petite, curvy. I'm wearing an extra small. I would say we were both commenting that we think runs a little bit big. So
Yeah.
I typically am a 2 or a 4. In I'm a 2. I'm typically an extra small or a small. In I'm an extra small. So just
Keep that in mind.
Yeah. Anyway, we love this look. It's super elegant. It's super versatile, and it can travel really well.
So no need to iron. And what I told him is that I am going to take this on my trip soon. And what I plan on doing is taking the slip from underneath and wearing it as a swimsuit cover up. So you can put a jacket on it, go to work. You can take the slip off and go to the pool. So
Yeah.
real work to weekend over here.
And I'm gonna bring this on a trip I'm taking and do the same thing. I'm going to a wedding in August, and I think I'm gonna wear this to the cocktail and then keep the sweater part as a cover up.
Really, really dope. So make sure you support all of the brands that support the podcast, but especially LaFleur. Again, longtime friends and supporters. Drop down to the description box if you are listening, and make sure you click our link.
And code JustUs20 for 20% off your first purchase.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So thanks to Okay, our new segment that I'm just loving so much. Amazing shit that we get to do because we're so nasty.
Nasty woman. That's a nasty woman. What is that amazing shit that you've gotten to do?
I think that I get to unapologetically decide what's best for me and my body.
Oh, talk about this.
And I don't need to ask for permission.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, like, I can name a bunch of things that I've done over the last couple weeks, but like, when I want to move my body, I move my body. When I want to rest, I rest my body. You know, if I want to and feel the need, I can get a massage.
Yeah.
And I'm not asking anyone for permission to do that.
There's a certain freedom and liberation, I think, in a more progressive mindset that might not be alternatively. And I think about who are the people who need a lot of rules and prescriptions around their lives and the people who don't. And what you just described to me just feels like what it means to be free.
Yeah. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but do you remember once when you came to Boston, I took you to that nail salon, Mini Lux?
Oh, I used to love that place.
Yeah, and so this is a great salon. It's on Newbury Street. Anyway, they used to have an online check-in. And so you would like go and check in the names of all the appointments. And someone I knew saw my name on the screen or something, and we were seeing them later that week. And she was like, "Does Josh know how frequently you go to Mini Lux?" And I was like, I don't know.
Why is that something for him to have an opinion on? It's like, does he know how often I brush my teeth? Why is that something?
Like, why would he care?
Right.
Like, it's how I take care of myself. I have a job. We are a unit.
If you didn't, you're a unit and you spend money and
right,
you
like
choose.
He trusts me. I trust him. He buys a surfboard when he feels like he needs it. I get my nails done. I don't know. Like, it was just such an interesting, and made me so grateful that I don't live in that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting mindset. I don't even understand what that means.
Okay, what about you?
I thought about this earlier. I feel like the nasty thing that I'm really excited for this season of life is just being a boss, like being my own boss, being in control of my life and my career very similarly. But I am in a great season as far as my business is concerned. And the fact that I get to name that and claim that and make it what it is that I choose feels amazing. And to also know that I built it brick by brick out the mud feels amazing as well. And so I'm just celebrating being the boss, to be honest with you.
It's so funny because, as you should, and you've been one for a long time, so it's interesting that you're letting yourself claim that now.
Finally. Yeah, I know. Because, I mean, we had a whole episode on ants. I encourage folks to go and to tune into that one. But it is this idea that I think we both have had to overcome a certain imposter syndrome. And I know for a long time, because my work, as ours is with the podcast, is in kind of this new online economy, I've had to work really hard to convince myself at times that what I'm doing is valuable and should be valued. And even if it's never by anybody else, my opinion is the only one that matters. But when you do something like become a lawyer, you know, a lot of that, I know for both of us, it's because of other people's expectations.
Say that louder.
And so we have had to reprogram what it means to define success and leadership for ourselves. And so that's where I am in this season.
I also think like there's a really natural segue into our topic.
For sure.
Right, because one of the things that we're investigating is what is leadership? What does it mean to us? And I think the benefit of being a nasty woman who gets to have some self-inquiry and autonomy allows us to make the decision about how we show up for leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like once you start to question things, you don't stop. So let's jump in.
So, Tashira, what is it that defines a leader to you?
So we've talked about this before, and I think society would tell us that it is a certain amount of educational aptitude and possibly like business acumen. It's a lot of specialization in a particular field. It is years, as typically, not always, if you're a cis hetero white man, some of these things change, but typically years in the game and being pretty astute about whatever field you're in and then deserving to kind of rise the ranks into leadership, might be the C-suite if you were in a business field. In nonprofits, people just die in their position, they never leave. So a little bit of a different hierarchy, but still quite hierarchical. I think in that way, as society defines it, it's pretty clear, and we learned that little, right? We have our teacher, we have our assistant principal, we have our principal, and we understand what a leadership trajectory looks like within our family units and outside of it. And I think I am in a space now where I'm starting to question that. But what about you?
I think I am too. I mean, I definitely am. And I'm questioning it, and I'm frustrated by how our society, and I don't know if this is a product of capitalism or what, forces people to profit off of other people's specialization and only make money or get to a level of success in an organization, whether it be for-profit or nonprofit, if they're in a leadership role. What if they're just a really good creator? What if they're really good at writing code? What if they're really good at litigating? What if they're really good at teaching or being a nurse? Why do those people who are really good at their jobs get tracked into leadership roles where they no longer get to do their jobs? Maybe they're not good leaders. And we see that all the time.
I have so many thoughts on this. So many thoughts. So as someone who gets really excited about systems and workflows and just how work is organized, it is so frustrating to see people who have a particular like aptitude and skill set be assumed to be leaders. So just because you are a good teacher does not mean necessarily that you are going to be good in admin, an administrative role. And arguably, you can be a great leader. You can have all the tools that it means to manage, to supervise, to motivate, to build teams, and be shit at the actual, or not even know sometimes, the actual mechanics of whatever the job or the industry is. And we don't teach people that nuance.
Yeah, and I also, in my personal experience, so I've experienced two things. So I actually really like being a leader, an organizational leader, and was, I would say, pretty good at it. But there's also something about the labor of leadership and unpaid labor that goes into some forms of leadership that is disproportionately placed on women and people of color and people who sit at the intersection. So I would argue that I was often placed into unpaid positions or not adequately paid positions of leadership because I was like competent and empathetic and could read people's emotions and listen to people and all of those things. But the other thing that I have noticed, particularly in very hierarchical organizations, either in the nonprofit or higher ed space, so those are kind of two of the spaces that I've had the most personal experience, is that like mediocrity floats to the top. So the longer people stick around.
Just stick around.
Because the smart people leave.
But and here's what I would argue, right? So we don't have a lot of experience in the corporate space. So I would love for our corporate listeners to sound off here. But what you find is that that's actually still true about mediocrity, because what those people tend to be most adept at is finding ways to shore up their soft skills to get to the C-suite. So it is the networking, it is the schmoozing, it is the things that happen outside of work, off the clock, that they're able to utilize to get them into a favorable position. And arguably, people who are just the hard workers a lot of times in corporate settings are not the ones that are getting promoted to the top, because they don't know all of the unspoken rules to get there. So the fact still remains true about mediocrity. And I think in the more privilege you rest in, the more that is possible.
Yeah, I was talking to someone about this, a woman who is in architecture, and talking about this idea of the mediocre folks just like hanging around. And she was like, wow, I've never thought of women who could fail up. I've only heard of men failing up. And I was like, you've never worked in a nonprofit or in an academic space. I mean, it's so interesting, right? Because that's a perfect example of, in a particular corporate setting, people can fail up, but maybe women and people of color can't.
Cannot. Yeah. No, very much a good old boys club, quite literally, often, from what I understand about many corporate settings.
I mean, the other part about leadership in this particular way is it's often related to pedigree, which is often in pedigree by what schools you went to, which is often related to privilege, because
Absolutely.
who gets to go to most of these schools. So like in Boston, like the Harvard Business School network is very strong. Harvard is very strong. And so those networks allow people access to communities and positions that if you went to a state school outside of Massachusetts, you wouldn't have access to.
No, not at all. I remember, Margo, being at Georgetown, and I was a transfer student to Georgetown. So I started at an HBCU, I started at FAMU, Rattler Strike, and decided that I wanted to transfer. And so when I got here, I had to work throughout law school. And I remember going into a professor's office because I needed like a research assistant position. And when I told him I transferred, he asked me where I'd gone to, and I said I'd gone to FAMU. He literally in front of me looked up the school and looked at its ranking. And for those who may not know, it did not, especially then, but I'm sure it still does not have the highest ranking as an HBCU, not the best funded school, primarily a commuter school, all the things that do not have to be described here on this podcast. But to have somebody in front of me check my pedigree was such an interesting and racist experience, right? And so to your point, it is all about, because what if I went to FAMU and I was a straight A student, which I was, by the way,
Of course you are.
versus having gone to a school with a higher rank and been a mediocre student?
And also, why does it matter? So I think that's the other thing, because like leadership is often spoken about as this whimsy. Like, you're a leader, you're charismatic, you're this, right? But actually, it might be none of those things. Maybe those things are supplementary to, also you knew this person from grad school.
And that's how you got to the position. But let's kind of break this down and add some nuance to it, because somebody listening is like, okay, that's easy for you two to say as attorneys. Am I not supposed to want my child to be successful?
No, so that's exactly the opposite of what we're saying, I think. I think we're asking folks to investigate what it means to be a leader. And I think in a capitalist society, but tell me what you think, we have this idea of who leaders are. They're managers in corporate settings. They're managers in big agencies. They're managers in nonprofits. They have administrative positions in academic or public school organizations or private school organizations. They're electeds, people who've been elected to positions of power, either on the state, local, or federal level. They're judges, right? They're administrators at hospitals, right? We have this idea of who a leader is. We have also ideas of who community leaders are. But think about all the people that make the world go round.
Should they not also be celebrated? Absolutely. And also, I think under the definition that you just named, it doesn't hold room for the fact that being a leader is fucking hard for a lot of people, and it comes at a tremendous cost. And so part of this too is defining success for ourselves and asking ourselves, is leadership truly what is going to make us happy? Because there is a narrative for life that I think saying, I am comfortable and happy where I am. Even if it doesn't mean another $100,000, if it doesn't mean I have a staff of 600, there's still something about this position that feels tremendous. Why can't we just hold space for that and be okay with it? Why does there have to be the consistent striving for more and not even know what more truly is?
I don't know.
What?
Because I think we were talking about before the podcast, before taping, right? This idea of like the super wealthy being super miserable.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right, and I think the data proves that, and that it's never enough, and there's always the next thing, and if you're resting on anything, you're lazy. So if you're not moving towards more wealth when you're wealthy, then you're just a lazy. I don't really understand it myself, but this idea of being content in the moment as not striving and therefore not wanting the most for your family.
Well, can I say something too that it just made me think that we have to, and this is so, again, capitalist. This idea that if you are not striving for more, you are categorically lazy. If you are not working yourself to the bone, you are shiftless and you are not a productive member of society. And it is also not just capitalist, because I don't want to writ large talk about any one economic system. It is the form of capitalism that we live under in this country that is so exploitative, that makes you think that unless you are working yourself to the bone and striving to earn more money, that you are useless. It has to be more, no sleep, hard work, don't see your kids, don't go on vacation, work 365 days a year. If not, you have not earned success and you are not worthy of it. It's bullshit. It is not true. And if you do not strive to be a leader in this way, it does not mean you are not leading in so many ways in your life.
Right, because I think, right, so that's the thing. Like when I think about people, like what is a leader, right?
So let's talk about that.
Right, so I would define a leader as someone who I look up to in some way. Either they have a quality that I admire, they have a skill that I want to develop, there's something about the way they move through the world and serve others or their families or their communities that I look up to. The way they treat the earth. I don't know, like I could go into the different ways that I view leaders, but I don't think that's how necessarily everyone else does.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, I think my grandmother, who was a domestic worker, was and is a tremendous leader. I mean, she's the matriarch of our family. But before that, she was the middle child of 10 and played a huge role in supporting her mother, especially in later years. She did a lot within our community, within our family, without a whole lot of money or educational privilege. She ran our family reunions every year. She was a deaconess in church and played a leadership role there. She taught Sunday school and vacation Bible school, right? So like all of these ways that people show up and hold, and that's what leadership is, right? You're holding
You
things
lived
down.
with her.
She raised me, the child of 2 teenagers, and other people, by the way, as well. I have many cousins that came within and out of our household. And my grandmother was a domestic worker, yes, but there were periods of time where she didn't work at all. And my grandfather's phosphate mining salary, she found a way to stretch that money to feed a family of 7, 8, 9, 10, depending on the year, the time, the space. And so those are leadership qualities and skills that if she was Elon Musk would have made her very wealthy.
Yeah.
And we don't give credit or credence to it.
And we've also kind of created this friction between those who are striving in that way and those who are not.
Yes.
Right? And so you see it a lot play out among mothers. Like those who are working mothers versus like working outside of the home versus not working outside of the home versus like having a job that just pays the bills versus those who are on a corporate trajectory and have like 4 nannies. You know, like
Yeah.
there's tension within those communities too. So it's the patriarchy kind of chipping away at the matriarchy, which we know who upholds the patriarchy.
Yeah, women. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I just want us to live in a space and live in a world where we privilege something different. And that's what I really hear us saying, because there are people who have natural skills and abilities at organizational leadership in the way that we're talking about it today. And I want those people to go out there and do it and be happy doing it if that is what brings them joy and contentment.
Totally. I think exactly. That's exactly. But it's like, just because you are good at something doesn't mean you need to be a leader in an organization.
Well, can you give the example about the doctor that you gave earlier about looking for the best breast surgeon?
Oh, yeah. I was like, what example? And I was like, look, if I had to go through my surgeries again, and I really lucked out, but I don't want a resident doing my breast surgery. I want the most experienced doctor who's done the surgery over and over and over and over. And actually, I did have that. But there's a reason why this person wasn't in leadership, and I can tell you that another time. But I lucked out. Most people who had the skills of my surgeon would have been pushed into leadership.
Exactly.
Right? Because we don't privilege clinical skills in a medical setting.
And so the way to do that then would be to compensate people and to find ways to evaluate performance in order to privilege the wisdom, the tenure,
Think about
and the
teachers.
time.
What if we paid teachers? Really paid teachers. So people, instead of going into tech, went into public school teaching.
Oh, absolutely. We would live in a different world.
What if we privileged nursing?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that nurses on the ground, on staff, made as much as traveling nurses and administrative nurses.
Absolutely.
Then people and our loved ones who are in the hospital would be getting the best care.
And I think about direct services as well.
Direct service social workers.
Yeah.
Think about child welfare workers.
The people who provide the social safety net for this entire society should be the ones that are compensated the most, but it's not like that. And so,
people who answer 911.
girl, first responders in any way. And so for those people, they're listening right now saying, well, we have to go into leadership because
we have no choice.
We have no choice. How are we going to get paid? And that is what we are questioning. The query is around why is that? And it does not have to only be that way.
This is a decision. The people managing the first responders are making more than the first responders.
Right.
So that person that goes to the emergency is making less than someone who's signing off on their timesheets. That's a choice.
It absolutely is, right?
And it makes sense that the first responders move into management, because why can't we share it? Because we know we burn out. I mean, there's just so much that we know and we don't privilege, and we don't support people to stay in positions where they could make the most difference.
You made me think about, like, what would it mean for us to have collective bonus structures? What would it be like for us to have 360 evaluations and have that be a norm, not an exception? Like, there is an idea around teamwork and community building that everyone has a piece of the pie. And just because you are a manager or a leader does not mean that your piece is more important. And so how can we hold space for that in a compensation model, for one, but also in just the organizational values and DNA? There is some science behind that I'm sure there are very smart people studying that I would love to know more about.
Me too. Okay, so sound off. We want to hear from everyone. This is something that affects everyone.
Yes.
Because we've all grown in this country with leadership being defined in a certain way. So sound off. We can have a lot more conversations about this. Dumb shit.
Whew, girl. Let me tell you something. This is hot, scalding tea, and we should not be surprised. The Supreme Court right now is on fire. Trump promised it was going to happen. We are here, but it's particularly Alito's wife that has come unfucking hinged. This bitch is cuckoo bananas. Go ahead, friend.
So she likes to communicate in flags. We communicate differently. She communicates in flags. So I don't remember exactly when, but the American flag was being flown upside down at their property in New Jersey. So for those who don't know, what does the upside down American flag indicate to some people or communicate to some people?
Election deniers.
Right. So that the 2020 election was a hoax.
And we already know that she came out very vocal about that, to the point where she was like asking what can be done. And was it audio recordings or was it news reports that actually were verified?
I believe it was audio recordings. But remember, not only Alito's wife, but Thomas's wife too paid for a bunch of buses to come to the Capitol on January 6th.
Yeah, they have a really great time tearing down the American democracy. Like that, I feel like they get together, have tea, and just talk about ways to institute fascism. So she said, you know what I want? I want a Sacred Heart of Jesus flag, because I have to look across the lagoon at the Pride flag for the next month. Okay, go ahead, friend.
So
Wait, hold up.
there's so many interesting and like problematic parts of this, but I think like before we even get into any of the analysis of her interpretation of any of these flags, this woman is married to a Supreme Court justice. So I think, kind of notwithstanding any of the flags, the fact that she's flying any flag, they're flying any flags, like any flags, is problematic.
Are you saying because of her husband needing to maintain a position of neutrality publicly?
Correct, because he's a judge.
Oh, yeah.
And he's the judge of the highest court in the country, where it is not only an obligation, but it is of the utmost importance that he remain impartial.
Yeah.
Especially to things like the election, which is coming up in front of the Supreme Court. So I know this is different, but I do have friends and mentors who are judges, state court judges. And when I tell you that I can't even buy them a cup of coffee.
For sure.
Right? Because of perceived impropriety. I don't even practice anymore, you guys. I'm not in court.
Yeah.
But I'm a lawyer.
Yep.
And just even the perception that these state court judges could be persuaded, they won't even let me buy them a cup of coffee.
And I think that that's an important distinction, Margo, because somebody who does not quite understand like the mechanics of the court system and the Supreme Court especially is probably like, well, what's the big deal? They get to fly a flag. I think we have to underscore in no uncertain terms how ridiculous this is. This is an unprecedented moment in history.
Anyone else can fly whatever flag they want.
For sure.
But judges cannot do some of the things that lay people can. Then they shouldn't be judges if they want to do that, right? They can't have social media presences. They can't be outwardly political. They can't advocate for certain political causes. That's because they are neutral by law.
Absolutely.
They apply the law. That is their job. They can interpret the law however they do, but with at least the outward perspective of neutrality.
Yeah. And that moment has gone. That is a thing of the past, because Donald Trump has given people like Martha-Ann Alito political cover to do whatever it is they want. And I think what they are hiding behind, which is so ironic, is their wives. But we know that Alito is aware that an upside down American flag, what that actually means in front of his home. And it's the home that he shares with his wife.
And I would argue that Justice Thomas knows that paying for buses to come to the Capitol to overturn an election, which is what his wife did.
Absolutely.
Is against the Constitution as well.
Back to your point about influence, let's also talk about all of these trips that they've been taking on private jets and not reporting, just outside.
Tashira, I mean, we are moguls, but if we got gifts like that, we would have to report it.
Mm-mm.
We would.
Mm-mm. No. Because, Margo,
no, we would. Don't worry, we would.
We are edging towards a fucking dictatorship. And they're telling us this.
I mean, this is Putin, but like baby Putin.
Yeah, no, they're telling us this. They're like...
It's like the law doesn't apply to me. These rules don't apply to me. And oh, by the way, when these cases get to me, I'm going to interpret them however we want. And what the problem with that is that if we don't trust democracy is very fragile.
Yeah.
We know that. But the courts and the democratic judicial system works only because we trust it. If we
Yeah.
don't trust it, we don't have to agree with it. We don't have to agree
This is very fair.
with the outcomes or the decisions. But if we don't trust the process, what does that mean?
Then everything goes up in smoke, for sure. And in some ways, I don't want to be fatalistic, but I often wonder, well, is that because it was just always a veil anyway? So in this period of time, for things to be eroded to this point, then how secure were this country's values? How secure and embedded was the so-called moral fabric if this is where we are?
And how is the party of law and order not upholding law and order? That I mean, it's such a cognitive dissonance.
No, why again? It's back to these things don't apply to people like us, and I think that is what they're fighting for, right? They are fighting for white people, cisgender people, straight people, for men especially,
For Christian people.
To be able to be in the most privilege, and the fact that some things were becoming more equitable, at least superficially. Oh no, they big fucking mad. They are, bring the buses to the Capitol. Burn it all down, goddamn it. Not on my watch. Because I'm a white straight person who's a Christian, and what I'm gonna do is run this shit right here. This is mine.
Well, it's going to be really interesting because, I mean, and not too distant of the future. I mean, we're not going to be a predominantly white society.
And that's scary for them.
Well, it's scary for them, but it's also like them crying about it isn't going to have as much impact.
At all. So y'all sound off. Let us know what you think about Flaggate. And I'm interested to see how this continues.
And I'm also interested to talk about who gets the law applied to them and when.
Yeah.
Because I think what we have seen and what we know is that certain people, the book is thrown at them, and other people can break the law constantly.
Constantly. Yeah, and I mean, mass incarceration has taught us this for the disparities in powder versus crack cocaine, right? So we've known that we have lived in a very racially biased and unjust criminal legal system for some time. But I think there's something about watching it play out this way that is mind-blowing.
And I think, I mean, I don't know about you, but there's always been a different level of deference to the Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah. No,
Right.
for sure.
Like, particularly in our education and how you're trained as a lawyer, right? That, what happens in state courts, what happens with lower level offenses, what happens on the streets, that's one thing. But like, once something gets up to the Supreme Court, now that is real. Those are real smart people. And what we see is that it's just a charade like everything else.
Everything else. And imagine us seeing this in our lifetime. It feels like we are watching an alternate reality almost every day for me. So
let's not despair that today is no different than yesterday, which is no different than tomorrow.
I love that.
And that it is important to have these conversations and call out when things are unjust. And I do think that just talking about that, I do think that not everyone who isn't involved in law might not know why this is such a big deal, might not understand why this is such a big deal. And I think it's important for us to really stress how it has actually nothing to do with political affiliation and all to do with the role of being an impartial fact finder. We have people on the Supreme Court now who shouldn't be there.
Oh, absolutely. And that was the plan all along.
Right. And so Trump stacked the court. He stacked the court with abusers, people who didn't adhere to the law, and who are political appointees. And that's not how this position
it's supposed
should
to go. And so I think that was strategic, and it's easy to forget because of the number of people and the fact that they are supposed to be impartial and are rarely in the news until now, how important their decisions are. So sound off below, you all, and let us know your thoughts.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Justice. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to learn more about our podcast, be sure to check us out on our website at justicepodcast.com. You can also reach out to us there if you want to be featured on the show, or if you have a business or a product that you think would be a good fit for our audience. Thanks again for listening.